Lakshmi stepped out of her son's home in Palo Alto with a small smile on her face and her palu gently tucked into her waist. The air was cooler than in Chennai, and the streets were wide and quiet, dotted with coffee shops, electric cars, and glassy buildings. It was her second visit to California, and though she didn't speak much English, she enjoyed walking and observing how different the world felt on this side of the globe. Her son, Sundar, was busy with meetings all day. She never interrupted him when he was working. Even as a child, he was always serious about studies. She used to worry sometimes. Is this boy too quiet? Too focused? But now, the world knew him as the CEO of one of the biggest companies on the planet. She still saw him as the thin boy who used to eat too many idlis and ask endless questions about radios and circuit boards. That afternoon, she decided to take a short walk near University Avenue. She had seen a beautiful perfume ad in a magazine that morning and wanted to check it out. There was a small store nearby that looked elegant. She didn't want to buy anything expensive. She just wanted to look, maybe test a fragrance, maybe find a simple scarf for herself, or a small gift for her neighbor back in India. She wore her usual cotton sari, light blue with white flowers. No makeup, no designer bag, just the same purse she had carried for years, one she had stitched a few times herself. Her chappals clicked gently on the sidewalk as she walked toward the store. When she opened the glass door, a soft bell chimed. The store was beautiful. White walls, gold shelves, everything clean and shining. There were shelves with perfumes, scarves, handbags, and a few pieces of jewelry locked in glass cases. Two young women stood near the counter. One looked up from her phone and gave a smile, polite but cold. The other glanced at Lakshmi's sari, then looked down again. Lakshmi gave a small smile and began walking around slowly. She didn't want to trouble anyone. She lifted a perfume bottle gently and sniffed it. It smelled strong, like roses after the rain. She liked it, but placed it back carefully. Then she touched a silk scarf, deep green with tiny golden leaves. She thought her sister would love that. She turned to ask the lady at the counter, "How much?" "This one." Her voice was quiet, unsure. The woman looked up, paused, then said, "That one's from our premium collection. Very exclusive." The tone was not rude, but not warm either. Lakshmi nodded and tried to ask again. "Is maybe small gift item? For friend?" The woman hesitated, then turned to the other one and whispered something. They both smiled, and the second woman came forward. "Ma'am, perhaps you would like something more affordable? There's a gift shop just across the street. It has lovely Indian-style items." Lakshmi blinked. She didn't understand every word, but the meaning was clear. She wasn't welcome here. Her face flushed slightly. She nodded politely and whispered, "Thank you," then turned and walked out of the store. The sun was still shining outside, but it felt a little dimmer. She crossed the street slowly, not to visit the other shop, but just to walk. She found a small bench near a flower shop and sat down. Her fingers were cold. She stared at her hands, the same hands that had cooked 3 meals a day for decades, washed clothes by hand, stitched uniforms, carried school bags. Now they felt helpless. She wasn't angry, but she was hurt. It wasn't about the perfume, it wasn't about money. She didn't even like buying expensive things. She was used to counting every rupee even now. But inside that store, she felt invisible. Not because of what she said, but because of how she looked. A memory floated into her mind. She saw herself sitting on a hot summer afternoon in Chennai, stitching clothes for the neighbor's daughter. The ceiling fan creaked above. Little Sundar sat beside her, playing with a broken radio. "Amma, why does this wire make a sound?" he had asked. They had no fridge, no scooter. Sundar used to walk 2 kilometers to school. She packed him curd rice with her own hands, making sure to add a touch of mango pickle so he wouldn't feel hungry. She and her husband had saved every paisa to pay for tuition, school books, entrance coaching. There were days when she didn't buy a sari for herself for 5 years. Her husband took only 1 new shirt a year. When Sundar got into IIT, they had borrowed money to send him. When he left for America, she cried quietly in the kitchen, hiding from her neighbors. He used to call her every Sunday, no matter what. Even when he was working 2 jobs, he never forgot. Now, people recognized his name across the globe. Reporters followed him. World leaders shook his hand. But today she was reminded that outside of that bubble, to some people, she was just an old Indian woman in a cotton sari who didn't belong in a shiny, cold luxury store. She sat quietly on the bench watching people pass by. Some jogged in branded shoes. Some walked their dogs in fancy jackets. A young woman passed by carrying a large shopping bag from the very same store. Lakshmi smiled softly. She wasn't jealous. She had everything she needed: a good son, a happy family, good health. But she wished people didn't judge others so. Quickly, an old man walked by with a little girl. The child pointed at her sari and asked, "Grandpa, what is she wearing?" The old man smiled and said, "That's a sari, sweetheart. It's beautiful, isn't it?" Lakshmi's heart warmed, just a little. At least someone noticed her in a kind way. After a few minutes, she stood up and began to walk back. The street still looked the same, but something inside her had changed a little. She wasn't broken, but she felt a little bruised. She wouldn't tell Sundar. He was busy. She didn't want to worry him. What would he do anyway? Get angry at some shop assistant? No, she would forget it. She would go home and make some tea. Maybe call her sister in India. Maybe read her prayer book. But a tiny part of her still carried the feeling. That cold look, the polite rejection, the soft push toward the door. Not because she did anything wrong, just because she didn't fit their picture of who belongs in such a place. Little did she know that quiet moment, that silent bruise, would reach her son in a way no one expected. And it would remind the world that respect has nothing to do with money, or clothes, or status. It's about how you treat someone when you don't know who they are. And that simple truth was about to echo far beyond that little boutique on a sunny street in Palo Alto. Lakshmi walked slowly back to her son's house, carrying the quiet weight of what had happened at the store. She didn't speak to anyone on the way. She just smiled at the flowers on the sidewalk, nodded at a jogger who passed her, and entered through the side gate without making a sound. The afternoon sun fell gently through the glass windows, lighting up the living room with a soft, orange glow. Inside, the house was silent, filled with the stillness that only a mother's presence could create. She sat down on the brown sofa, ran her hand over the armrest, and leaned back. The house was so different from her own in Chennai. There, her living room was filled with the smell of filter coffee and the sound of auto rickshaws outside. Here there were smooth carpets, smart lights that changed color with a word, and glass tables that showed every fingerprint. She respected this life, was proud of it, but never felt like it was hers. It belonged to her son, Sundar, the boy, who had once counted coins to buy mango juice at the corner shop, now had a smart assistant turning on lights and music for him. She closed her eyes and sighed. She didn't cry. Lakshmi had learned long ago that tears don't solve anything. But as she sat there, her mind drifted back through the years like old photo albums flipping by on their own. She remembered her small kitchen in Ashok Nagar, the red cement floor, the steel vessels stacked in the corner, the broken fridge they couldn't afford to repair for nearly 5 years. There was a time when Sundar had fever, and there was no money for a doctor. She had used neem leaves and turmeric, staying up all night to keep cold cloth on his forehead. She remembered crushing tablets with a spoon because they were too big for him to swallow. She had worked hard, harder than anyone ever saw. Not in an office, not for a salary. But every meal, every washed shirt, every clean notebook, every polished school shoe, she was behind all of it. Nobody clapped for her. Nobody said thank you every day. But that didn't matter to her. She only wanted her children to do well, to be good people, honest, hardworking, respectful. There was one time when Sundar wanted a school atlas. It cost more than they had that week. She sold one of her bangles to get the money, then cooked leftover rice into lemon rice for 3 days to stretch the food budget. When Sundar found out years later, he cried. But at that time she had simply said, "I didn't want you to feel left out in class." She laughed softly now, remembering how excited he was when they first got a telephone at home. He would sit by it, waiting for it to ring and answer it like a call center employee. "Hello, this is Pichai Residence. How may I help you?" She never imagined that one day he would lead the company that made the phones everyone used. Lakshmi had always known Sundar was different. He was curious. He didn't talk much, but when he asked questions, they were deep. Not "what is this," but "why does it work this way?" She remembered one day when the TV remote stopped working. Instead of crying or calling for help, he took it apart and stared at the small green board inside for hours. "Amma, look, and this part is loose. I think the battery metal is bent." He was 10. When he got his seat at IIT, she had cried, not from sadness, but from relief. She had worried for months that they wouldn't be able to afford the travel, the hostel, the books, but somehow, with her husband's help and a small loan from a friend, they managed. She sent Sundar off with just 2 suitcases, both second-hand. She gave him a blanket she had stitched herself and slipped a tiny Ganesha idol into the corner pocket, just in case he ever felt alone. Years passed. Emails replaced letters. Then came the video calls, then the invitations. "Amma, I'm getting married. You'll like her, I promise. Amma, I got a new role. Amma, I have to speak at this big conference." Through every milestone, Sundar remained the same. Soft-spoken, kind, respectful. But the world around him changed rapidly. It got bigger, shinier, louder. Lakshmi adapted in her own quiet way. She learned how to use WhatsApp. She watched his speeches on YouTube. But she never let it go to her head. She still swept her own floor at home. She still made sambar from scratch and corrected the maid if she used too much salt. Even when Sundar gifted her a smart speaker, she kept it in the corner and only used it to play bhajans. She opened her eyes and looked around the room again. The bookshelf was filled with awards, plaques, framed photos with important people. There was one picture of Sundar shaking hands with the Prime Minister. She got up slowly and walked toward it. She touched the glass gently. She wondered, if that store assistant had seen this photo, would she have smiled differently? Would she have offered her tea? Maybe even shown her the scarves without hesitation? But that was the problem, wasn't it? Why should someone need a title, a connection, or a name to be treated with kindness? Why wasn't it enough to just be a person? A mother, a woman, a customer who had walked in with curiosity and respect. She sat back down and opened her purse. Inside, she had a photo of Sundar from his school days, hair neatly parted, wearing a shirt too big for him, holding a school prize. She took it out and smiled. To her, this photo meant more than all the awards on the shelf. Just then, she heard the gate click. Sundar was home. She quickly put the photo away, straightened her sari, and smiled as he entered. He looked tired but happy. His eyes lit up when he saw her. "Amma, you're home. Did you go out?" She nodded. "Yes, just walking nearby." "Did you eat something?" "Yes, I made upma. There's still some left if you want." He laughed. "You and your upma. I'll have some soon." He sat next to her, pulling his tie loose. "Did you buy anything?" She shook her head. "No, nothing. Just saw some shops." He looked at her, sensing something. "Everything okay?" She paused. Should she tell him? It wasn't such a big thing. No one had hit her. No one had shouted. But the way she had felt, it had stayed with her. She chose her words carefully. "One shop, they didn't want to show me anything. I asked, but they said I should go to another place." Sundar frowned. "Which shop?" She waved her hand. "Doesn't matter. I don't want you to do anything. It just felt strange, like I was not good enough to be there." He was quiet for a moment. His jaw tightened, his eyes became sharp, but his voice remained gentle. "Amma, I'm really sorry that happened." She shook her head. "It's okay. I'm fine." "No, it's not okay. It's not about the store. It's about how they made you feel. That's not right." She reached out and patted his hand. "Don't make it a big thing." But inside his mind, wheels had already started turning. Not out of anger, but because something in him had shifted. His mother, who had sacrificed everything for him, who had always walked with her head high even when she had no money, had been made to feel small in a place that sold things she could now buy 100 times over. That wasn't just unfair. It was wrong. Lakshmi didn't know it yet. But her son was about to show the world that respect has nothing to do with power or position. It comes from something much deeper. Something you carry from home, from childhood, from the values your mother teaches you long before you have a name the world recognizes. The evening passed quietly at Sundar's house, but inside he was far from calm. He could see the faint sadness on his mother's face, a quiet kind of hurt that wasn't easy to fix. The words she had shared with him, though spoken softly, echoed in his mind. Lakshmi, his mother, had never cared for status or fame. To her, the most important thing was always respect, for herself and for others. But what had happened that afternoon wasn't just a minor slip. It was a sign of something bigger, something far more troubling. How could a person be treated so differently simply because of what they wore or where they came from? Sundar had always been aware of how people treated his mother. She wasn't used to the luxury that surrounded him now. While he had a team of assistants managing his schedule and his wardrobe, his mother was humble in her needs and desires. She never demanded anything for herself. All she wanted was to see him succeed. And now, after years of building a life for him, she was being made to feel small in a store simply because of her appearance. His mind raced. He couldn't just let this go. He couldn't change the way the world worked overnight. But he could do something about this moment. He knew the store didn't deserve his anger, but someone needed to remind them of something basic. Respect wasn't something you earned by wealth or title. It should be given freely to everyone, no matter where they came from. He didn't need to do it for himself. Sundar had long made peace with the fact that fame and fortune didn't mean as much to him as people might think. He cared about his work, about changing the world with technology. But it was his mother, the woman who had given up everything for him, that drove him to make this right. The next morning, Sundar sent a quiet but firm message to his team. Please make sure to arrange a meeting with the team at the boutique on University Avenue. I want to speak to them about something important. He didn't explain further. No one needed to know the details. Sundar was no stranger to taking action when he believed in something. He didn't just sit back and wait for change to happen. He made it. As the day went on, Sundar didn't mention the store incident again to his mother. He wanted to give her space, but he also kept an eye on her. He saw how, even though she acted like nothing was wrong, there was a quiet sadness in her eyes. She was sitting by the window in the living room reading a prayer book, but she wasn't really reading it. Her mind was elsewhere. She was trying to understand why she had been treated that way, why her age and clothes mattered more than who she was. Sundar knew his mother well. She was strong, but she was also human. And this wasn't something that would just disappear overnight. Later that afternoon, he asked her, Amma, do you want to go out for a walk? I thought we could try a new restaurant today. It's just a short drive. Lakshmi smiled at him, grateful for the offer. She wasn't upset with him, but she was clearly still lost in her thoughts. That sounds nice, Sundar, she replied, her voice soft. Sundar drove them to a nearby restaurant, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something needed to be done. He wasn't sure exactly how he would approach it yet, but he knew that he couldn't let that store or anyone else continue to act as though people like his mother didn't matter. As they sat down at a table, Sundar picked up his phone. He was about to make a few calls, but before he could dial, Lakshmi put her hand on his. Sundar, you don't need to worry. I'm okay. I'm not angry, she said, her voice full of kindness and understanding. I know people judge by what they see, but that's just the way things are sometimes. Sundar looked at her, searching her face for the strength he had always admired. He didn't want to argue. He didn't want to push her to admit how much it hurt. But he also knew that this wasn't just about her. This was about the many people who were quietly treated like they didn't matter. Lakshmi wasn't the only one who had faced this kind of discrimination. There were so many others who didn't have a son like Sundar to stand up for them. That night after dinner, Sundar sat down at his desk. His team had already made arrangements for the next day. He would meet with the store manager and the staff. Sundar wasn't sure what to expect, but he knew he would make his message clear. The next morning, he drove to the store with his mother by his side. She didn't ask why they were going or what he planned to do. She trusted him. He could see the slight nervousness in her eyes, but she didn't say anything. She knew this wasn't about clothes or perfume. It was about something deeper. It was about the respect she deserved as a person. When they entered the store, things seemed a little different this time. The store was busy, but the staff looked up quickly. The same woman from the previous day was behind the counter, her eyes wide when she saw Sundar. She recognized him immediately. There was no hesitation this time. She rushed over with a bright smile, but Sundar raised a hand gently to stop her. He didn't want her to make it into something it wasn't. "Thank you," Sundar said calmly, "but I'd like to speak with the manager." The woman looked slightly confused but quickly turned to fetch the manager. A few minutes later, the manager arrived. He was tall, wearing a crisp suit. "Mr. Pichai," he said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to have you here." Sundar shook his hand, but there was no warmth in his voice. "I didn't come here for the honor," he said quietly. "I came here because of something that happened yesterday. You see, my mother was in this store and she was treated as if she didn't belong. She was dismissed, treated like she wasn't good enough to be here." The manager's face turned red with embarrassment, but Sundar didn't stop. He wasn't angry, but his voice was firm. "My mother is a person who has given everything to raise her children. She doesn't need to wear designer clothes to be treated with dignity, and neither does anyone else. No one deserves to be looked down on because of what they wear or how they look." The manager stammered, clearly uncomfortable. I'm so sorry. We didn't mean to disrespect anyone." Sundar nodded, his gaze steady. "I'm not asking for an apology. What I'm asking is that you remember something. Respect doesn't come from someone's title. It doesn't come from their wealth. It comes from how you treat people. Every person walking through that door deserves the same kindness and courtesy, no matter where they come from or what they're wearing." The manager looked down, clearly ashamed. "I understand. I will make sure that something like this never happens again. I am truly sorry." Sundar didn't respond immediately. He just turned to his mother, who was standing quietly beside him. She was watching him, a small smile tugging at her lips. She didn't need to say anything. She had always known he would do the right thing. This wasn't just about a store, it was about standing up for what was right. And for Sundar, that meant making sure that respect wasn't something that only the rich and famous could expect. As they left the store, Sundar felt a quiet sense of relief. He hadn't done it for the store or for himself. He had done it for his mother, and for everyone who had ever been treated like they didn't matter. He glanced over at her as they walked down the street. Her smile was soft, but it was the most beautiful thing he had seen all day. As they drove back home, Sundar knew that this wasn't just one small victory. This was a reminder that no matter how far you go, no matter how much success you achieve, the most important thing in life is how you treat others. That was something his mother had taught him long before he had even realized it. And today, he had just reminded the world of that simple truth. The days after the incident at the store were quiet, but something inside Sundar had shifted. It wasn't that he was angry or upset anymore. The event had passed, but the conversation with the store manager had sparked something in him, a deeper understanding of what true respect meant. He thought about it often, especially in the weeks that followed. The world wasn't just about success or money or status. It was about how you treated others, whether they were rich, poor, famous, or unknown. And Sundar had always believed in being kind to people, but now he felt a stronger need to stand up for what was right. Sundar knew that his mother, Lakshmi, would never speak of the incident again. She was too graceful for that. She had always been a woman of quiet strength. Her humility and grace were evident in everything she did. Yet Sundar couldn't stop thinking about how she had been treated. How it must have made her feel. She never asked for anything. She never demanded special treatment. But the small acts of kindness she had always shown to others had earned her the right to be treated with the same dignity, no matter where she was. That weekend, Sundar found himself sitting at his desk at home, thinking deeply about the idea of respect and kindness. He knew that he had to do something. It wasn't enough to just fix one moment. The world needed to change in bigger ways. He needed to find a way to influence others, to remind people that kindness shouldn't depend on wealth or position. He picked up his phone and sent a quick message to a few people on his team. Let's set up a talk. I want to have a conversation with a few leaders about the importance of respect, kindness, and fairness in the workplace and society. Let's bring it to the forefront. Within hours, he had scheduled a meeting with a few prominent leaders from various fields: business, technology, education, and even social work. Sundar wasn't sure exactly how he would approach it, but he knew that he needed to speak out, especially to those in positions of power who could help shift the way people thought about respect. The meeting was held in one of the large conference rooms at Sundar's office. As the leaders filed in, Sundar greeted each of them with a smile and a handshake. They were all important people in their respective fields. Some had achieved immense success, while others had dedicated their lives to making a difference in society. Sundar had always admired them for their work, but today, he wasn't just interested in their achievements. Today, he was there to discuss something far more crucial. Once everyone was seated, Sundar stood up to speak. His tone was calm, but there was a deep sincerity in his voice. Thank you all for coming today. I know that we all have busy schedules, but this conversation is important. I wanted to bring us together to talk about something that's been on my mind for a while: respect, kindness, and how they shape the way we lead and interact with others. The room fell silent as everyone looked at him, curious about where this conversation would go. Sundar continued, "We all know that respect is the foundation of any successful organization, community, or society. But it's often something that's overlooked. People are treated based on their title, their income, their status. But real respect isn't about those things. It's about recognizing the humanity in others, treating them with dignity, no matter who they are or what they have." He paused, for a moment letting his words settle in. "Recently, I had an experience with my mother that made me realize how often we take respect for granted. My mother was dismissed in a store because of how she looked, even though she didn't ask for anything special. She was treated like she didn't matter, simply because she wasn't wearing a designer outfit or carrying the right brand. It made me think about how many people, especially in our society, go through life being treated like they don't count, just because they don't fit the mold of what we consider successful." There was a quiet murmur among the group as they took in what Sundar had said. He could see that some of them were uncomfortable, but he wasn't there to make anyone feel bad. He was there to spark change. "I'm not asking for a revolution," he continued. "I'm asking for something simple. Let's treat people like people. Whether they're in a meeting with us buying groceries or walking down the street, let's lead by example and make respect a part of our everyday actions." A few of the leaders spoke up, offering their thoughts. One of them, a woman who ran a successful social enterprise, nodded thoughtfully. "Sundar, I completely agree. It's easy for us to forget that respect is not just something we give to the people who can do something for us. It's something we should give to everyone, regardless of their background. But sometimes we get so caught up in our own world that we forget how important it is." Another man, a CEO of a well-known company, added, "You're right. We often base respect on the wrong things: titles, wealth, achievements. But I think we need to do more than just say it. We need to make it a part of our culture, in our companies, in our homes, and in our communities. We need to encourage kindness and fairness at every level." The conversation continued for hours. They discussed how they could make this message a part of their organizations, how they could encourage their employees to treat everyone with dignity and respect. They talked about implementing training programs that focused not just on skills, but on empathy, kindness, and understanding. They brainstormed ways to create workplaces where people were not judged by their looks or their title, but by their abilities, their character, and their work ethic. Sundar felt a sense of relief as the meeting progressed. He wasn't just speaking from his personal experience. He was speaking for everyone who had ever been overlooked, dismissed, or made to feel small. He realized that change didn't have to come from one person. It could come from many people, all working together toward a common goal. As the meeting ended, the group made a commitment to take action. They agreed to start initiatives within their own organizations that promoted respect and kindness. They would host workshops, create awareness campaigns, and ensure that the message of treating others with dignity would be part of their corporate culture. Sundar left the meeting feeling a sense of fulfillment. This was just the beginning. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Changing the way people thought about respect and kindness would take time, but he had started something important. He had reminded these influential leaders that true respect wasn't something that could be bought or earned. It was something that should be freely given to everyone, regardless of their background or position in life. When Sundar returned home that evening, he was in a much lighter mood. Lakshmi was sitting on the couch, reading a book, her face serene and calm as always. Sundar sat beside her and smiled. "Amma, I had a meeting today, and I think it went well." She looked at him, her eyes filled with curiosity. "What was the meeting about?" Sundar took a deep breath, his voice full of pride. "It was about something important. It was about respect, Amma, about how we treat others no matter who they are. And I think we made a real difference today. We're going to make sure that respect isn't something you have to earn. It's something everyone deserves." Lakshmi smiled, her eyes softening. "I'm proud of you, Sundar. But remember, the world is a big place. You can only change it one step at a time." Sundar nodded. He knew his mother was right. It would take time, but he was determined. He had learned from her that the small acts of kindness, the quiet moments of respect, could change the world in ways that the loudest voices never could. And so Sundar's journey continued. He wasn't just building technology anymore. He was building a culture of kindness, one that respected people for who they were, not for what they had. The work wasn't easy, but with every step he took, he knew he was making the world a little bit better, just as his mother had always done for him. Sundar's efforts to foster a culture of respect didn't stop with the meeting he had arranged. It wasn't enough for him to talk about kindness in boardrooms or meetings with leaders. He knew that real change had to come from everyone, not just a few high-ranking individuals. The lessons he had learned from his mother, her quiet strength, and the painful incident at the store had set him on a path to create something more lasting, a world where respect was offered without question to every person, regardless of their background, wealth, or appearance. The first step was to make sure the message was spread. Sundar decided that the best way to do this was through his own company, Google. After all, he had the resources and influence to make a real difference there, a place where people from all walks of life came together. He wanted to take the same values of respect, dignity, and equality that his mother had instilled in him and make them a core part of the workplace culture. He gathered his leadership team and outlined his vision for the future of the company. "We need to change the way we think about success," Sundar said. "It's not just about what we achieve in terms of products or profits. It's about how we treat each other. Our people are the most important resource we have, and they deserve to be treated with the same respect regardless of their role in the company." His words struck a chord with many, but Sundar knew that words alone weren't enough. He wanted action. He proposed a new initiative called Respect at the Core, which would be integrated into Google's employee training and development programs. The goal was simple: make sure that every single employee, from the front desk staff to the engineers in the highest ranks, understood that respect wasn't something that could be earned, but something that should be given freely. The initiative included a variety of components. For one, the company would launch a series of workshops on empathy and interpersonal communication. These workshops would not focus on skills like coding or marketing, but rather on understanding and respecting different perspectives, backgrounds, and experiences. Google, known for its innovation, was now going to be an innovator in respect and equality as well. Sundar also implemented a new leadership program that emphasized humility. He wanted to ensure that leaders within Google would not only be experts in their fields, but also examples of kindness and respect. He asked senior leaders to go through the same workshops as the junior employees, reinforcing that no one was above learning and growing. This helped to foster a culture where respect wasn't just something you expected from others, but something you actively gave to everyone, no matter their position. However, Sundar knew that change couldn't just come from the top down. He wanted to make sure the message reached everyone at the company, from entry-level employees to the senior-most executives. He asked his team to create internal campaigns, posters, emails, and videos that would spread the message about respect being at the heart of Google's culture. These materials were distributed across Google's campuses worldwide, sending a clear message that every person, no matter who they were, deserved to be treated with dignity and kindness. But Sundar also knew that change had to go beyond the workplace. It had to become a part of the company's public image too. Google was one of the most recognized brands in the world, and with that power came responsibility. Sundar began reaching out to other tech companies, hoping to share his vision for a more respectful, kind, and fair industry. He knew that the tech world, like many other industries, was notorious for being cutthroat and competitive. Yet he believed that even in such an environment, it was possible to prioritize people's well-being and dignity. To start, Sundar initiated a series of public speaking engagements where he could share his personal experiences and the lessons he had learned. He spoke at tech conferences, university campuses, and public events, reminding everyone that success wasn't just about building innovative products. It was about building a culture that respected every person, regardless of their background. His speeches resonated with people from all walks of life. The message was simple but powerful. Treat others the way you would want to be treated. Through these talks, Sundar was able to connect with other leaders who shared his values. He worked with these leaders to form a coalition of companies that would commit to creating workplaces where kindness and respect were foundational values. The coalition didn't focus on profit margins or stock prices. It focused on people. It emphasized the importance of creating inclusive environments where everyone, regardless of their race, gender, or background, felt valued and respected. The leaders who joined Sundar in this effort believed that making respect a core part of a company's culture would lead to greater innovation and long-term success. But even as Sundar worked tirelessly to make these changes, he faced resistance. Not everyone agreed with his vision. There were those who believed that respect and kindness were soft qualities, that they didn't belong in the world of business. They argued that in order to succeed, companies had to be ruthless, cutthroat, and focused solely on profits. Sundar didn't argue with them. He simply went on with his work, knowing that the true power of leadership was not in making people fear you, but in making them feel seen, heard, and respected. One of the biggest challenges Sundar faced was convincing his peers that the respect-based culture he envisioned could actually drive results. Many of them were hesitant, unsure if it was really possible to integrate kindness into such a competitive field. Sundar didn't have all the answers right away, but he was confident that the people who felt respected would be the ones who did their best work. They would be more motivated, more engaged, and more loyal. This wasn't just about being nice, it was about creating an environment where people could thrive, knowing that they were valued for who they were, not just for what they could produce. It wasn't long before Sundar began to see the effects of his work. Employee morale at Google improved. People started talking about their colleagues not just in terms of their technical skills, but also in terms of their kindness, empathy, and respect. People who had been overlooked before, whose ideas hadn't been given attention, now felt more empowered to share their thoughts. In meetings, people were no longer afraid to speak up, knowing that their opinions would be listened to, not dismissed. As Sundar continued to push for a culture of respect, something unexpected happened. Other companies started to take notice. They saw the positive changes at Google and wanted to learn how they could apply the same principles in their own organizations. Sundar was invited to speak at more conferences, to consult with companies who wanted to create similar initiatives. He was becoming a voice for a new kind of leadership, one that didn't focus solely on bottom lines or power plays, but on creating environments where respect was paramount. For Sundar, this was more than just about business. It was about making the world a better place. He had learned from his mother that small acts of kindness could have a huge impact. She had taught him that respect didn't come from what people wore, how much money they had, or how high their status was. It came from recognizing the worth in every individual. And now, Sundar was doing everything in his power to spread that message, hoping to inspire others to follow suit. At home, Lakshmi continued to live her quiet life, never asking for praise or recognition. She didn't know the full extent of what Sundar was doing, but she knew that her son had always been someone who wanted to make a difference. She saw how his work had grown and evolved, and she knew it came from the same values she had taught him: the importance of treating others with dignity, no matter who they were. One evening, Sundar sat down with his mother again, this time to tell her about the latest developments at Google. As he shared the stories of how the company was changing, how employees were becoming more engaged and happier, he saw his mother's smile. She didn't need to say anything. Her eyes spoke volumes. She was proud of him, not for the success he had achieved, but for the kind of person he had become. "Amma," Sundar said softly, "you've always taught me to do the right thing, even when it's hard. And today I'm seeing that change is possible. I want you to know that I'm doing this for you, for all the quiet strength and love you've given me." Lakshmi's smile deepened. "I knew you would do great things, Sundar. But remember, the greatest thing you can do is help others see the goodness in themselves. Keep spreading that light." And with that, Sundar knew that his mission wasn't over. It was only just beginning. The road ahead was long, but he was ready. He had learned that true success wasn't measured by how much wealth or fame you accumulated, but by how many lives you touched and how many people you helped realize their worth. His mother had taught him that, and now he was passing it on to the world. The journey of respect, kindness, and dignity had just begun, and Sundar was determined to make sure it would continue long after he was gone. Would you like to discuss more about the story or any specific part?